Welcome to another episode in the Business Ready for Sale podcast series. As you know, a lot of my podcasts are not just around getting businesses ready for sale, which is my primary sort of market, but also around growing businesses, having good businesses, sustainable businesses, profitable businesses, because all those things make a business more saleable and a lot more enjoyable to work in and a lot more profitable, which is good for the business owner and everyone involved. So this episode is about mental health in business, how to recognize it and how to deal with it. And the speaker I have on this podcast is Katie van Heek. Katie is a member of my Business Owners Taking Action mentoring group. A few months ago, Katie presented to the mentoring group on how to recognize mental health issues in the workplace, not only your team and your employees, but yourself as well as the business owner. I mean, it can be pretty stressful being the owner of the business, and sometimes mental health can creep up on us. Issues can creep up on us without us really realizing it until someone points it out to us. So when she presented to the group, it created a lot of questions, a lot of interest. And I said, Katie, let's do this as a webinar podcast and put it out to a lot more people. So it was done as a webinar with Katie presenting a number of really interesting slides. And because this is a podcast and you can't see the slides are available in the show notes for the podcast. Let's have a listen to what Katie's got to say, and I'll sum up again quickly at the end. Welcome, everyone. Welcome if you're live on this webinar. Welcome if you're watching the recording or listening on the podcast. My name's John Denton, and I've got two business names that I operate under. One is Business Ready for Sale, which is exactly what it says. I help business owners get their businesses ready for sale and sell them if that's what they want to do. And that's based on my experience as a business broker and coach over many years. And another business I operate under is Business Owners Taking Action, which is a group mentoring process. Now, my guest today, Katie, is a member of that group. She's been a member twice. The first time was with an auto servicing business, and then she came back with her health intent business and still having the auto servicing business as well. I don't know how some of these people manage 2 or 3 businesses, and particularly the ladies with families as well. But so I want to welcome Katie. And Katie, give us a little bit of your background and tell us how you got into mental health.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everybody else. So when I first joined the Boda Group 15 years ago, I think it was, I was new to owning a business, and I was looking for some mentoring and a group of individuals. And over the course of the last 15 years, growing that business, interacting with staff, having 3 children, and then interacting with them, going off and having jobs, coming back to business, I've recognized that mental health is as important as our physical health. And through a few key life experiences, I've been able to see that I could be quite effective working in this area. So I went back and did some study in this area, and I have built my business and love sharing all of this stuff with everybody.
Fantastic. And Katie presented to the Votering group, so she's both a member and a presenter to the group a little while ago, and it created so much discussion and interest. I said, Katie, why don't we do this as a webinar? So here we are. So Katie, ready to go when you are.
So today we're going to have a look at mental health in the workplace as an individual business owner, but also the interaction that you may have with your staff. And I'm going to keep it really specifically in that lane. Mental health crosses over into all different spaces of our business, but there's other key persons that you can bring in that are professionals around HR and WSH and some of the topics that we touch on to give you support in those areas if you want them. So I'm going to keep bringing it back to mental health and the individual within the workplace. So today we're going to have a look at these 5 things. We're going to talk about what is mental health, why has it become so prevalent in workplaces, and why is it becoming more of a forefront of conversations. We're going to look at neurodiversity and how do we factor neurodiversity into our conversations and our interactions with people, and even our culture of our business to support a diverse, flourishing workforce. We're going to have a look quickly at psychological safety, psychological contracts, and psychosocial risks. And there's lots of big words in there, but we'll break it down a little bit so you can understand how it's relevant to you and your business. As a licensed facilitator of the Mental Health First Aid course in Australia, I'll talk about that and what that looks like and how that might fit into your business to increase some skills around that. And then we're going to have a quick look at personal self-care for the busy business owner, because like John said, some of us have multiple businesses, some of us have families and households and other things that we're doing in our life, and it's not always a straight path. So we're going to dig into that a little bit and talk about some of the things we can do to support ourselves. How does that sound, John?
Sounds very good.
So firstly, when we're looking at mental health, we're talking about mental health as a continuum. So, and this is from the knowledge that in the Mental Health First Aid course, which I'll touch on a bit later. And if you think about mental health like the clouds in the sky, I guess, is something that I heard, which it's always stuck with me and I thought was really interesting. The clouds move across the sky, and there may be big, dark, scary clouds. There may be lightning-filled clouds. There may be white, fluffy clouds. And if we think about ourselves as the cloud, it's very easy to get stuck in that perception. But when we broaden our conception to think of ourselves as the sky, then we can start to see this transitory nature of mental health and mental illness. Now, that can be different for everybody, and their capacity to bring themselves back into mental wellness, if they have been ill, is reliant on many different factors. And so we want to dig into that a little bit in the workplace. So how do we manage mental illness or mental crisis without seeing the person as a liability or not able to continue to contribute? So if someone broke their leg, for instance, you would just make some adjustments in the business to allow them to maybe not have to use stairs or work from home. How do we look at mental health in that capacity as well?
That spectrum is interesting, Katie, because sometimes it's good for us to stop and think about where we are any particular day on that line, on that continuum. I had lunch with a friend some years ago, quite a few years ago now. I think I was still in the corporate world at the time. And towards the end of the lunch, she said, "You know what?" He said, "Take this the right way, but I think you're suffering from depression." And being a male and stoic, and, I said, no, surely not. And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how did you pick that up?" And he said, "Well, just your demeanor and your language." He said, "It's not how you normally are." He said, "I think you're depressed." And he told me to check out a couple of websites, which I did. And I thought, yeah, I think he's right. And then I went and saw my GP and I got some help. But I would never have picked it up if it hadn't have been pointed out to me.
It can do. It can be like that old tale about the frog. If you put a frog in cold water and slowly warm it up, it's going to stay in there until it's too late or it's in crisis. If you put it into hot water, it will know and jump straight out. So we're not aware that we're becoming ill, and it takes somebody to stop and interact or intervene, if you like, and say, hey, look, let's have a chat about this. And there's some of the skills that we train in mental health first aid.
Excellent.
So, it can be a barrier or an opportunity, and it depends on the perspective that we take within our business. And I think everything that I present today is about perspective and about seeing things from different angles. So neurodiversity. Now, the word neurodiversity was coined in the 1990s, actually, and it was part of a thesis that looked at why people are different in their thoughts and their process. So it just simply is an empowering term that means all brains are different. And the reasons that brains are different can vary. And the way that is presented, or the way that is shown to other people, can look very different depending on where that neurodiversity is coming from. But an interesting stat is that 15 to 20% of our workforce these days are diagnosed neurodivergent. And some of those diagnoses include ADHD, OCD, autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia. But another statistic is that they've shown that having a neurodiverse team can offer opportunities of 30% more productivity. And I think that's really important for us to keep both of those things in our mind when we're thinking about neurodiversity. So we're looking at differences expressed through behavioural differences. So that may be stimming or making noises or not making eye contact. Learning diversity, so dyslexia, dyspraxia. It may be acquired diversity, so a trauma. That could be something that's happened in the workplace, or that's something that's happened outside of the workplace. Mental health fits into this diverse range in that acquired external category. And some people have a combination of these expressions. Just like mental health, neurodiversity is about finding what differences do I have in my brain, and how does that impact my life? Am I seeing the positives in the different way I think about things? Maybe there's a creative space that I offer my workplace that others don't, because they can't see past that set of instructions. And I think that I said it when I presented to the Boda group, that entrepreneurs fit into the neurodivergent population, because they do see the world differently, and they are attracted by opportunities, and they seek those out. So neurodiversity is finding, how does it impact me? What do I offer? And what supports do I particularly need? And what supports do I need in my business?
What surprised me was how many people in the group related to having some of these neurodiversity traits, if you like. It's more common than I realised.
Yeah, and I think that's because we've got language to put to it now. So previously, in other generations, it may have been uncategorized as that person is restless. Now we have some language to go, well, what kind of restlessness is that? Is it anxious brain restlessness, or is it a physical restlessness, or is it a combination of the two? So we've got more language and more understanding over the last 30 years around what this is as a presentation. And as humans, we'd like to categorize things, but it's also important that the person's not their diagnosis. That's just a tool to help us look at where they fit into the world.
Yeah. Tony has made a point there about thinking back to people you've worked with in the past, and recognizing that they probably, some of these traits or issues, I don't really want to call them issues, but some of these traits were, now we understand them a heck of a lot more than we did in those days.
Yeah. And, they become issues when they impact our lives negatively. So some of them may present as issues, and then it becomes around managing that and recognizing what supports that person requires. So it can be positive and negative or neutral. So when we're looking at the idea of a neurodiverse workplace, we're going to have to look to looking at things like psychosocial risks, psychological safety, and psychological contracts. And I'll dig into those a little bit so that we get some understanding, I guess, of what they are. Psychological safety is a model that it's about teamwork. And it talks about, does a person feel safe to turn up as themselves in a workplace? Do they feel safe to learn, ask questions, make mistakes, and let people know that they've made those mistakes? Do they feel safe to speak up and contribute from their own unique point of view and challenge? Do they feel safe to challenge the status quo? And in a workplace, like any relationship, these categories have to be bound by respect for everybody else, and also compassion, so an understanding that we are different. But it's not a free-for-all, if you like, to just throw things into the mix. There has to be some guidance around that. The workplace has to develop a culture of permission. So when I say permission, it's about having a culture established in your employment strategies, in your onboarding strategies, in your toolbox meetings and your ongoing conversations that you're having, that diversity is rich and inclusive in this workplace, and that we value all contributions and we value feedback from each other.
Culture is a key one, isn't it? It's the leaders or the business owners that set the culture and create that safety, allowing people to say it as it is, say it how they see it, but letting people know that it's okay to speak up. I see so many workplaces where that's just not the case, because people tell me things that they won't tell their boss or the business owner or the manager, because they're afraid of what will happen.
Yes. And I mean, those barriers go both ways, right? Business owners sometimes don't want to step into this psychological space because they have fears around what that means to their culture. And then the employees have fears around what that means to their continued employment or their acceptance within the team. And that goes down the line to then psychological contracts. So what are the unspoken rules or expectations that I've come to work in this workplace with as an employee? And what are the unspoken expectations and rules that I have as an employer employing people? And really having a look at what they are and whether they match. And that comes down to values, and it comes down to culture, and it comes down to the conversations and the style of interviewing even that you recruit people through. So allowing your recruitment process to be broad and tailored to the individual. I know there's lots of stuff in the media at the moment about skills-based hiring, and that's very much around understanding that psychological contract. So what do you expect to have to offer as an employee of this business, and what are you expecting in return?
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff with Robert Kiyosaki years ago, and he was very big on what he called upfront communication. And he told a very good story about it, which I won't go into now. But his point was, even when my fourth program that I did with him was 16 days in Hawaii, and so we'd paid a lot of money to be there. There was about close to 300 people, and on the Thursday night that we all arrived, he got everybody into the room, and he gave us the upfront communication. He said, "This is how it's going to be. These are the rules of the game. This is what you're going to do while you're here. If you don't like it, leave now. We'll give you your money back." And then he paused, and then he went on with something else. And he said, "And if you don't like it, leave now, and we'll give you your money back." it sounds a bit dictatorial. I'm not suggesting you do that in the workplace, but the point that he was making was that I'm going to tell you exactly how it's going to be and what you're going to do. And if you don't fit into that, then don't be here. So, excuse me, in a business, as you were saying, that recruitment is letting people know, well, this is how we operate around here. These are our values. This is what we expect. It's all part of what you quite rightly called the onboarding process, which so many businesses don't have.
Yeah. And if you may have all of your values spelled out in that onboarding process, but if the rest of your workforce is not on board and working towards those, then the new recruit will soon slip into that socially acceptable behaviour within that workplace. So you may find that you're doing all the right things at the top end, but it's the back end and the staff that you already have, or the culture that is present already. And you may want to look at some change management processes to bring those two into alignment.
Absolutely.
And psychosocial risks are things like conflict between peers, poor relationships, all of those things that we would be looking out for, things like bullying, harassment, people not feeling like they're part of the team, so feeling excluded, and making sure that we're bringing those to conversations in a safe way, making sure that we're communicating, making sure that we're documenting. And again, a good HR specialist will be able to give you some guidance around what that looks like for your particular business. And that moves nicely into mental health first aid and how that might actually work in a business or for a business owner. Mental health first aid is just like physical first aid in that it teaches us to identify if somebody is not coping, if their mental health is in fact worsening, or if they are already in crisis, how to respond to a crisis or non-crisis of mental health, how to offer support and look at tailored adaptations within a workplace that have to involve the person. So we don't just say, this is what I think you need to do because this is what I see. It's a conversation, and it's very personal. And these are soft skills, if you like. And then it's about reducing stigma. So it's about letting people know that supporting that psychological safety. It's okay to come and say, I'm not coping, I need some support, because you'll get the best out of your workplace when they feel like they can be supported by you as the business owner. And this is a 12-hour accredited course that I offer. John, I think you and I were having a chat about an example of what this might look like in a workplace before.
In terms of recognising when someone is not 100%?
Yeah.
I've had a few interesting experiences, particularly as a new manager when I started managing a branch back over in Canberra. Some days Cheryl, my wife, would come in and have lunch with me and bring some sandwiches in, and we'd sit and eat sandwiches. And anyway, one day she came in, and as she came through reception, I heard her say good day to the receptionist. We'll call Kay for the sake of anonymity. And she came in, hi Kay, hi Cheryl, John's in his office. Cheryl came in, closed my office door, which was unusual because I always kept the door open most times. And she sat up at the desk and got the sandwiches out, and she leaned across and said in a low voice, so what's wrong with Kay today? And I sort of sat back and looked around the corner and said, oh, nothing. She's at her desk. She must be okay. She's present. She's at her desk. Must be all right. No, there's something wrong. It's not a normal self. And I said, but how do you know? You've only just said good day to her. Cheryl said, yeah, but I can sense she's not herself today. Why, when I've gone, why don't you wait a few minutes and go out and ask her how she is, and maybe give her some time off if she needs some time off. Oh, okay then. And so Cheryl left, and I waited a few minutes. Then I went out and leaned on the reception. "Kay, you don't seem your normal self today. Is there anything wrong?" And she suddenly opened up with, "Oh, Ryan, my son, he's got a problem with the school and this, that, and the other, and I don't know." And I said, "Kay, look, would it help if you had the afternoon off?" She said, "Oh, could I?" She said, "That would be so good." I said, "Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, and give me a call in the morning if you need more time off." So she packed up and left, and I was the best thing since sliced bread. But the reality was, I didn't pick it up. I had no idea. Being a mere male and an engineer by training, somebody's at their desk, they must be okay. So
Yeah.
I hadn't sensed anything different.
Yeah. And that conversation could go one or two ways. It could be received really well. It could be received really poorly, depending on what state of mental health the person receiving the conversation is in. And, we've had to do it in business as well, where we've sat down with the person, we've said, okay, well, clearly there's some things going on here and you're not coping as well as you normally do. How do we support you to bring yourself back into that optimal space where you're giving us you're 100% and we're supporting you to do that? And I mean, that can look at like things like splitting lunch breaks to take smaller breaks during the day. So if you've got somebody that is neurodiverse or does get overwhelmed, they can take little breaks throughout the day and not be as overwhelmed, and will actually be more productive, because when they're there concentrating, they've got the capacity to do that. So it can be so many different ways that we can support people when they're when they have a mental health issue. It's really about creating a space of safety where that they can come and say, or people can recognise, like you said, be attuned to the people around them. And all of those skills are taught in this course.
Yeah, be attuned to them. We've got some comments here which I think are pretty good. Tony was saying, so you need regular check-ins that your values are being adhered to. That's when we were talking about values and everything, and that's, from my point of view, is absolutely right, Tony.
Yes.
When the eagles stop talking, the parrots start to jabber. If you're not keeping those values enforced and lived, and after a while it becomes the culture, so people live them anyway because they enjoy them and enjoy being part of the process. Julie made the comment about it can also explain the behavior of a potentially neurodiverse employer.
Yes.
And you were saying a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners are a little bit neurodiverse, shall we say, which again has an impact then on the employees, or can have.
It can have, and perfect segue into self-care for the business owner, and being able to recognise your own level of neurodiversity and your skills, your superpowers, and maybe the places where you require support. And I can think about a situation where that would come in to impact negatively on your workforce if maybe you're a really creative, expressive person and you're always running to the next thing, but the people behind you can't keep up because you've moved on before people have an understanding of what you wanted from them on the last thing. So making sure that when you're looking for diversity and supports in your team, that you're actually bringing in people that think differently to you, not people that think the same, because otherwise you'll all be running around in this beautiful creative space, but there won't be anybody doing the documentation or the follow through or the systemizing or the emails and things like that. So I guess that's about knowing yourself first. And like the slide at the beginning said, putting your own oxygen mask on first, figuring out who am I, how do I express my needs, what are my needs as a business owner, and what do I need from my staff and people supporting me to make this all work.
Celebrate diversity. You need all elements in a business. I say that there's a context in which you're allowed to be creative, but that context is also sets the rules. for the boundaries, if you like. You do need the diversity to have a really good business.
Yeah, and some of those conflicts may just be different people with different skills trying to work together, but they haven't actually sat and said, well, you're really good at this, but you're not so good at this, and I'm really good at this, and you're not so good at that. So let's divvy up the workload that works towards our skills rather than me trying to enforce what I do well on you and vice versa. That, that's all part of that open communication and finding people that think differently that can work alongside like different pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely right. And again, it comes back to the recruitment process and, picking up how people are different and recruiting them because of their diversity, not penalizing them for it.
Yeah. And different parts of us show up to work then show up in personal relationships. So there's lots of home businesses, there's lots of family-run businesses in Australia. We are a culture of startups, we're a culture of family connected businesses, and sometimes our personal relationships flood into our work relationships, and sometimes that is a good thing and sometimes it's not a good thing. So again, open communication. What do I need? What do you need? How do we separate? How do we make sure that if there is something going on at home, that our mental health is considered before we're coming and showing up for our employees, and we're not leaking that into our workforce, and vice versa. When we're a really strong team, let's make sure that everybody can see that and bring them along the ride as well. I was just going to refer to a few of the words on this slide because some of the words might be a little bit new for people. So the first three things I've got there is proprioception, and that's all about understanding where I am in time and space. So it's external factors of influence on my state. Interoception is about understanding our internal states. So am I anxious at the moment? Am I calm? Where am I in this window of tolerance, which I'll touch on in a minute? And neuroception is about our brains enforcing our physiology and our behavior. So the neuroception is a piece that I work with my clients, and it's all about understanding how their lived experience is informing their behavior and their thoughts and their understanding of their interactions, their social connections. So it's about getting an understanding of who you are and what you need and what works for you, creating habits that work in a business sense, and looking at who are the right people to support you, not to just cheer you on and be your cheerleaders, but also to challenge you and to make you step out of that, out of your comfort zone, I suppose we could call it, to grow as a business owner and as a business. Yeah, so it's such a big topic. Like, I feel like we're just taking the lid off it. So there are so many different things and tangents that we could speak about. It's really rich as far as a topic, and I encourage all business owners to at least take a small dive into this space. The 4 Strategies of Psychological Safety is a book by Timothy Clark. That might be a good place for people to start if they're looking for that model and how it would work for them. Yeah,
so I was going to say, you can tell us about some of the recommendations or workshops. Tony has asked a question here. Do you have any advice for how to deal with an employee who had been fine but then appears to be impacted by drugs or is acting out of character? I mean, in a small business, when you don't have random drug testing like big companies, so I guess Tony's saying you don't know what the issue is with this person. It may be drugs, it may not. I mean,
look, the way I view drug use is as a coping strategy. So when if somebody has moved from appearing okay to appearing impacted by a substance, then that has to be a conversation that you have, and it has to be done delicately. But it's all about bringing it back to safety. So is it safe for a person to be operating in your business while they're impacted by a substance? I've had to bring in drug testing on occasion in our automotive space. Hasn't happened very often in 15 years, but if somebody's struggling and then they've gone down a space of drug use or addiction, then it's about finding out why, how the business supports them. Does the business need to have that clear boundary of zero tolerance? You can't be impacted by substances when you come to work because you have to do blah, 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 and you put yourself and others at risk. Or does it have the tolerance of we need to get you some support so that you can move through this? But again, it's about having that initial conversation, and you may want to engage a HR specialist. You may want to engage somebody else to support you in that space. There can be, if the person, there can be all of those little liabilities that make us nervous about these conversations. But when you set those, understand what impact it's having on the employee themselves, the business, and others in the business, then you've got something to anchor your conversation in. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Tony said, good point, Katie. The drugs or alcohol may just be their coping mechanism for stresses they're dealing with and other things in their life. And communication is the key with compassion. This can be a challenge for business owners. I know that, again, it's a personality thing. I think sometimes, like, as I said, I use this as an excuse or justification all the time. I'm an engineer by training and mentality. So to have a communication with somebody about feelings and bringing up some of these issues, I do it now because I've learned over the years as a manager, you just have to do it. But it's still, I'm uncomfortable still doing it. And I think a lot of business owners are like that.
Yeah.
So are there courses, do you have something you can offer business owners to get them comfortable with having the conversation?
Well, we start those conversations in the mental health first aid training. It's a brilliant course as far as opening the door to practical practice on having those conversations. So we role play a lot in that course. We talk about how it impacts people. We talk about how to recognise changes in a person and what supports we can. And we dig into those layers a little bit more in those courses. I'm always happy to have those conversations with people, and I've got a great network of other professionals, HR, business structures, things like that I can refer people out to if we identify that it's in fact an issue starting over here rather than this piece in the middle that we're talking about. There's a big team of people, I guess, that you could to bring in to solve those problems. But really, I think it comes down to your motivation to have the conversation. So why do I need to address this? Who is it impacting? And what's the outcome that I want to achieve? And let's do this in a space where I'm not going in with a tone of accusation, but I'm going in with a tone of curiosity.
Curiosity, that's a good starting point, is the mental first aid course. Is that right?
Yes, I think it's a course that all business owners should do. And for micro businesses where it's just one person running the show and maybe a small team, then coming into a public course with other business owners can be really dynamic because you get to see different perspectives. And there's a few different ways I can offer that course. I can do it as face-to-face 12 hours. Or I can do it as a blended online course where, like the first aid courses these days, you do some online learning and then we come together and we unpack your learning to make sure that it's consolidated. So if you're time poor, we can look at doing those blended styles. but face-to-face is always my preference, because everybody gets in the room and we move through some of those uncomfortable spaces together.
Well, as you know, because of the BOTA group, which has been going probably 15 or more years now, as you said, that model that I came up with was the result of the training and development business that I had. We got people into a room, business owners. The best ones were the ones where we had a mix of business owners or senior managers, leaders, sometimes just supervisors, sometimes supervisors, frontline managers, all working on the material, but having that discussion in the room. So the learning was done outside of the group by reading and listening and answering some questions, and then coming together in the room. As you say, you get that mix of experiences, ideas. You realize that your problems and challenges aren't unique to you. Other people have had them as well. Other people have overcome them. And it's sharing all those things. And like with the BOTA group, I bring in expert people or experienced entrepreneurs and people to talk to the group to share their experience, because we should all be learning from one another. So, sorry, I get passionate about that, but I think it's such a good thing to have a diverse group of people in a room together. So,
yes,
Katie, your number is 0456 226 475.
Yes.
Or they can contact you by email at hi at healthintent, or one word.com.au. So hi at healthintent.com.au. And people can, if you drop me an email or put it in the chat now, then we can make a copy of the slides available to you.
Yeah,
that's okay, isn't it, Katie?
Absolutely. If there's an area that we've touched on today that people would like more information on, then I'm happy to have those conversations. And, you know, if enough people are wanting this information, I'm happy to put on some small workshops as well. So the possibilities are there.
If you want any more information from me, if you want to know any more about the BOTA group, of which Kate is a member, and I know at least one other person on the webinar is a member as well, then contact me at john@johndenton.com.au. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you. I look forward to seeing you on another webinar. If you're on the podcast, you can get a copy of the slides from the show notes on whatever podcast player you're listening to. Just search for Business Ready for Sale. That's the name of my podcast. Go to the show notes and you can download the slides and listen to the audio. So thank you, Katie. I'll ask if there's any more questions. This is your last chance to ask a question. Otherwise, we'll wrap and you will all get a copy of the recording. So thank you very much, Katie. Excellent stuff. Really, really important stuff. And good luck with everything.
Thanks, John. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. I hope you got some ideas out of that and learnt something about picking up mental health issues in the workplace or anywhere else amongst your family or friends for that matter. And always please be quick to seek some help or get help for someone if you can see that they need it. Don't let it fester. You can always contact Katie. You've got her details now on the slides, and she told you how you can contact her or contact some other counselling service or mental health services for help. Thank you for listening. Again, I hope it's been really useful for you, and I look forward to having you on another podcast soon. So from me, John Denton, it's bye for now. And if you want to contact me, john@johndenton.com.au, or go to my website to find out more about my services at johndenton.com.au, and you can contact me through there as well. Look forward to having you listening on another podcast soon, and it's bye from me for now. Bye now.